I think it is a true crime mystery. Carole Baskin, at some point in her life, married a man named Don Lewis, okay? 1997, Don Lewis goes missing and has never been heard from again. During the show on Netflix, Tiger King, Joe Exotic is accusing Carole Baskin of murdering her husband, Don Lewis, perhaps feeding him to her tigers. She denies any of that. And all of this now coming to a head in the true crime world that we live in, because a lot of people who've watched the show are wondering what happened to Don Lewis. We too are wondering what happened to Don Lewis. So of course, Julie Grant spoke with the sheriff in Hillsborough County down in Tampa, Florida. That is the town and county where he went missing from. And one thing that he talked about was a very unusual last will and testament.
Carole did have a judge deem her husband deceased several years ago, and that's how she was able to receive the full amount within the will. And then speaking of the will, that was a point of contention within the documentary that a lot of people thought it was forged. And I, like you and everyone else who watched it, certainly feel suspect of the will. I never have ever heard of anyone that crafted a will that said, in my disappearance or kidnapping, leave my money, my entire sum of my fortune to this individual. That's certainly suspect in itself. And we had one of her employees pleaded, or I guess during an interview said that it wasn't forged. It wasn't forged that she witnessed the signatures. Where later on, she had recanted her story and said she was forced to say that as an employee, and she didn't witness the signatures being signed on the will.
Unbelievable. Ted Rowlands, Julie Grant joining me now to talk about what we are all obsessed with, and now a true crime mystery. Great to see you both. Julie, you spoke with the sheriff. This is a very unusual last will that someone would leave. If I disappear, I've never heard of one like that.
Right. I mean, somebody actually providing for their potential kidnapping in a will. I mean, my goodness, what kind of life would an individual be leading to include something like that in a will? And as convoluted and complicated as the whole Tiger King Netflix documentary series is, Vinny, one thing I really learned from talking to Sheriff Chad Chronister is that their investigation of Don Lewis's disappearance shows that his life was just as complicated. And of course, that will being one of the things really focused on in the docuseries. And it's really still something that inconclusive to this day. I mean, we know she was able to get the court judgment to get all that money. He was estimated to be worth anywhere between $5 and $7 million. And something the sheriff shared with me was that Don Lewis was taking some of his money, some cash, out of the bank and taking it with him to Costa Rica. It's like he was living somewhat of another life in Costa Rica, according to what the sheriff's department uncovered in their investigation of this, which, by the way, Vinny, hasn't stopped. This has been going on 23 years. This case has never gone cold to them. It's still been open and they've still been working it. They're just trying to capitalize on this new vested interest in Don Lewis's disappearance through this docuseries.
Yeah, it's unreal. Ted, you think about people don't just disappear, right? Either they're murdered or they make themselves disappear. And the way the docuseries paints this whole picture, it looks a little suspicious.
Yeah, I mean, you don't believe in coincidences. I know, Vinny, you always say that. And here we have two. So now, is it a coincidence that Don Lewis, who loves life, I mean, he loves life, he's got money, he loves his big cats, he's very vocal about his love for Costa Rica and wanting to eventually relocate there. And then he goes missing. And then you have this will, this one-of-a-kind will that's never been seen before, turn up later, that says, in the event that I go missing, all my money goes to Carole. Come on, it's too much. It's way too much. And that is why Carole Baskin is in the position she is now after this Netflix documentary. You watch it and you're like, yeah, I kind of like Carole, but I think she might have killed Don. And that is what the sheriff's department is dealing with, and that's what she's dealing with, and she's not happy.
Absolutely. Another thing, Julie, you spoke to the sheriff about. Let's take a listen. You mentioned Costa Rica. There was a lot of things happening down there. Let's take a listen.
He actually, we heard, was sleeping with some younger individuals over there that didn't make their parents extremely happy. And he would bring them clothes, and inside the clothes, he would have the money wrapped up inside that he would take over there. We learned that he had some business dealings with, I guess you could say, shady or suspect characters over there. Some even make them equivalent to a Costa Rican mafia, if you would. But a lot of what we ran into was a lot of obstacles. A lot of people, like you saw during the documentary, where so many people, they were so fearful that there were spies amongst them that they almost had to prove their allegiance on a daily basis.
I just wanted to clarify, are we talking minor children, or are we talking just teenagers who are of the adult age but maybe living at home?
Good question. And our detectives who are overseeing receiving the tips and looking into them now, they didn't know. They couldn't give me an exact age, only that there were some parents that they were younger in age, and there were some parents that were extremely upset with them. So I don't know the exact age. I certainly would conclude that was they were minors. But again, I don't want to speculate in this case. I don't know the exact ages. Only young enough to make parents and fathers extremely irate with him.
Right. And do you know, were your detectives able to confirm whether there were sexual relationships with these girls, just to be clear?
They were. They were able to confirm that they were sexual in nature and that he paid them for those sexual encounters.
You know, Julie, could this be a case where he wanted to make himself disappear and he just wanted this other life down in Costa Rica and maybe had some money funneled down there and could live a life and just get away from whatever was going on up here?
You are so smart, Vinny. Certainly that's a theory, right? That's a theory that did he just make himself disappear? We know he had ties to Costa Rica. He had a second home there. They've established through their investigation at the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office that he was sending money there, taking clothing there. They found out he had a girlfriend there, in addition to paying other teenagers, although they weren't able to confirm the exact age, but teenagers for sex there, and having some shady business dealings, and had upset parents there. But the real kicker is the thing that kind of turns that theory on its head, that Don Lewis just wanted to disappear, is a question I asked the sheriff, and you'll see more of this interview extended in the show tonight, Vinny. But I asked them, do you think, Sheriff, that a homicide was committed here? And one thing he said in his answer was that, does someone disappear without their fortune, right? This guy's a multimillionaire. Does he vanish like that with no warning, no explanation, but leave his fortune behind? Kind of makes you pause and think, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's I'll tell you what, Ted, if I'm disappearing to Costa Rica, I'm taking the money with me.
Absolutely. And Costa Rica is not Mars. He would have surfaced by now. Let's face it. They get Netflix in Costa Rica. Don Lewis would have reestablished himself, and he'd have been outed by now. Now, could someone else have killed him because of what he was into? Absolutely. An irate parent down there in Costa Rica, one of these mobsters that the sheriff was talking about. Sure, maybe he had his undoing in Costa Rica, but those people didn't change his will. Afterwards, they didn't go that far with it. Maybe he just didn't show up for a while, and Carole did do something with the will. Maybe it is a just strange coincidence that he predicted his disappearance. I don't think so.
All right, you know, we're not the only three talking about this show. Obviously, people online, but take a look at who else is talking about Tiger King. O.J. Simpson is talking Tiger King. We get that coming up, and also Carole Baskin's husband, her new husband, the one that's alive, that she was married to for 14 years, has now responded to what everyone is talking about and that Netflix series.
Anyone who spends an hour with Carole would come away knowing that there was no way she had any involvement in Don's disappearance, and that the vicious rumors that were spread by his family are absolute nonsense.